Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We'll try that again. We tried it again yesterday. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. That's far better. My name's Richard Smith. I'm the director of the Tank Museum here in Bovington. Welcome to Bovington. Welcome to the Tank Museum. I'm this morning feeling as happy as any other man would be who'd just been driven around in a beautiful 1920 Silk Coach Rolls Royce. It's a very nice way for me to start the morning, and I hope that your morning too is filling you with joy and excitement because you've made a great decision today to declare the second day of Tankfest 2017 is open. Ladies and gentlemen.
D-Day. So we thought we'd show you, before we have our battle this afternoon, a little bit of a closer look at some of the vehicles. And coming on first of all, not armour, but one of those just iconic World War II vehicles, the Jeep. Now the Jeep was designed to an American specification in June 1940. They basically, the US Army said, we're going to need a little lightweight runaround, come up with an idea that meets this going to get there. Now the next interesting vehicle coming on, from a distance, some of us tank spotters might think this looked like a dingo. That was the British scout vehicle of World War II. Fantastically a brilliant little design. This is a copy. This was done in Canada. The problem was we couldn't make enough dingoes in the UK to service all the Commonwealth and Allied forces needs. So the Ford Motor Company of Canada, we gave them the plans, and they basically did the same body as a dingo, but they put it on. Now the next vehicle, again, this comes from the Dutch military collection. This is a Humber Mark IV armoured car. Now what happened at the beginning of the war, the Guy Company, Guy Armoured Cars, were just starting to be built in Britain. And they built about 100 of them, but because they were better at building tractors for things such as towing 25-pounders, they decided to hand over building the armoured cars to the Roots Group. So that became Humber, and Humber used the same chassis as the Guy armoured car, but slightly different turret. It's actually got a name on Beatrice. It's named after the Queen of the Netherlands. So go and have a look at that if you've got a chance later. Now, here's what I have to say is one of my favourite vehicles. This is the famous Dingo. And as I mentioned, Dingoes, we couldn't make quite enough of them. Over 6,000 were made. Lots of different units ended up using them. So a really great bit of British design success in the Second World War. Now this rather odd looking vehicle coming on now, this is the Otter. This is a vehicle that was again made in Canada. It's a light reconnaissance vehicle. It was, again, put together from components that were being made out in Canada already. Perhaps something like a boy's anti-tank rifle. And again, these ended up being made out in Canada. Over 1,700 of them. Daimler petrol engine in the back, wheeled nice and quiet. So this is one of those, again, another great design classics. Not quite a Dingo on steroids, but it's the same sort of faceted shaped armoured hull. Daimler petrol engine in the rear, 2-pounder gun on that turret. And the Daimler, for its time, was tremendously advanced technologically, get the words out. It's got disc brakes on it, very fast when it wanted to go fast. Again, it can go reverse gears, just as many backwards as forwards, and there's a tiny little vision slit on the rear, just above the engine, and there's a steering wheel behind that. So the commander could take over the vehicle and steer it out of trouble, again for reconnaissance purposes, because if you're the first going down the road, you're most likely to be the first to bump into the enemy. And of course, so we were trying to quickly find ways of putting vehicles together. And what you've basically got here is a Morris Light utility car. They ended up armour plating it. The driver sits in the middle, very awkward position. You've got a commander's position there and a gunner's position with him, engine in the rear, and again it's got that slightly improvised shape. But it was actually quite successful, so they carried on making them and carried on using them. And they ended up being used in Northwest Europe during the Normandy campaign. The RAF regiment also used them out in North Africa. And again, depending on the role you're in, this one we've got a dummy boy's anti-tank rifle in that turret. There's an early Harrier inside the museum on display. That led to this massive family of vehicles that we variously call Brent gun carriers or universal carriers. This one's a universal carrier. This particular one was made in Britain. Huge numbers of them were also made in Canada. We ended up making them in Australia. 14,000 T-16 carriers were made in America as well, something else we forget about. So overall, about 70,000 different types of tracked carriers, not dissimilar to this, were made during the Second World War. And again, they were used for many, many different functions. sometimes just literally at the battlefield, run around taking ammunition forwards, all sorts of different roles to try and to give some form of armour turret-like structure behind with machine guns on to face wherever it was needed to fire. The side armour on the rear of the vehicle would fold down, and of course after the Normandy landings we realised that most of the Luftwaffe had been knocked out of the sky by the RAF and the US Air Force. So vehicles like this, they were sometimes used in a ground attack capacity. 450 caliber machine guns, that's an awful lot of punch. Looked very different to this one. This is an improved version, as they put loads of modifications on it. They called it the M5, and you can see here that we've done it up as a sort of Normandy veteran. It's got the deep wading apparatus on the back, and that means basically that huge great bit of venting on the rear there was so this could wade up through the water of the beaches after coming off the landing craft and not flood the engines. And again, for our battle later on, we've added a coloured hedgerow device. And again, we'll talk about that later on during this slide. So that's our M5, light American armour, Thomas Stewart. When he first went into service with the British Army for Africa, the guys were so impressed with it, they actually called it the Hummy as a term of affection, and that name, the British forces, stuck as well. It's got that high velocity, it's got the barrel, muzzle-free 76mm gun. Most of the Shermans on D-Day with the American forces still had the 75mm gun. 1 in 3 of the Shermans with the British and Commonwealth forces had the 17-pounder. And again, for the tank nerds, telling them apart, the 17-pounder barrel, the muzzle brake on the end, is nice and round like a football that's been pierced. This one, the 76 here, it's got that slightly flared look to the muzzle brake, which is a good and simple way of telling them apart. So there we've got a lineup of some of those vehicles that you might well have been seeing down here in Dorset, heading off to the coast. There's that phrase about the south of England being like an armed camp before D-Day, and down at Weymouth the American Rangers left for their assault on Pont du Hoc. Poole Harbour, we've got British and American forces leading all the way along the coast. So some of these vehicles here would have been familiar on the roads around here in Dorset prior to D-Day. And quite an impressive lineup there of wheeled armour. Really privileged, really thankful to those guest vehicles that have been brought here, and certainly to the Dutch military who have come along with vehicles in running order that we just don't have here at the collection. We'll be seeing some of these vehicles again by raising or lowering the air suspension. It partially equips the light cavalry regiments of the Royal Army Corps. It has a maximum speed of 80 miles per hour on roads or 55 miles per hour over rough terrain. It is designed to protect personnel against roadside explosions and mine attacks. Jackal 2 is armed with a general purpose machine gun, or GPMG, for crew protection, operated by the commander at the front. Scimitar 2, the original Alvin CVRP, or Combat Vehicle Reconnaissance Track, came into service in 1971 and is still in service now, which means that in some cases 3 generations of soldiers from one family have served on the same scimitars. During the last 46 years, Scimitar has served in the British Army as a reconnaissance and fighting vehicle in the Falklands War, peacekeeping in Bosnia and Kosovo, and both Gulf Wars in Iraq. and of course, most recently in Afghanistan. 2010, the contract was awarded for the development, testing and management of an upgraded Cylinder 2 standard version. This was undertaken by the Royal Engineers. It is designed to enable troops and vehicles to cross gaps of up to 60 metres by laying a selection of close support bridges. Along with Trojan, it gives a common heavy armour fleet based on the Challenger 2 main battle tank chassis. Sites carry and lay the current range of in-service close support bridges, providing ground manoeuvre formations with improved capability and giving them greater flexibility. This Titan is commanded by Sergeant Roberts and driven by Sergeant McLaughlin, members of the combat support wing of the Army. Is an armoured engineer vehicle designed to open routes through complex battlefield obstacles and to clear and pass through minefields. The standard equipment of configuration includes a dozer blade, mine plough and an excavator arm. A full-width mine plough can be mounted at the front to clear mines, and a lane marking system can also be fitted. Trojan can also carry machines to fill ditches and tow a Python trailer, which contains a rocket-propelled mine clearing system. Improved visibility is achieved by incorporating direct and indirect Trojan is commanded by Sergeant Johnson and is driven by Sergeant Holdings and crewed by Sergeant Dagger. All are members of the CSW wing here at the Armour Centre. Now to make up the trio. Terrier. The Terrier armoured figure is the Army's most advanced engineering vehicle. Despite weighing 30 tons, Terrier is an agile and versatile piece of equipment that can reach speeds of almost 50 miles per hour. It is fitted with 5 onboard cameras and thermal imaging technology, providing soldiers with a 360-degree surveillance capability that can be used by day and by night. The technology used in Terrier is so advanced that the vehicle can be operated by remote control, enabling soldiers to clear very dangerous routes from a safe distance. Terrier is commanded by Sergeant Holdings and driven by Sergeant Lee. Again, both members of the CSW of the Armour Centre. Ready to fire, with a further 12 missiles carried in the hull. Stormer is fitted with a roof-mounted air defence alerting device, ADAS. The ADAS infrared scanner and processor provide target detection and prioritisation, and the system automatically moves the weapon sight onto the target. The Starstreak ATDS is designed to counter threats from very high performance, low-flying aircraft and fast pop-up strikes by helicopters. Armoured prepared recovery vehicle is a highly evolved armoured vehicle designed to recover and repair damaged tanks on the battlefield. The Krav is based on the Challenger 1 main battle tank chassis. This extremely powerful armoured vehicle is fitted with a powerful wing, a front-mounted dozer blade and an Atlas hydraulically operated crane, which is capable of lifting a complete Challenger 2 power pack. Armoured and engineer units and close support artillery regiments are also equipped with Krav to recover their heavy vehicles such as Type, Trojan and AS-90. The craft is protected by a single operated by the commander. It can also provide maintenance service. Warrior 5130 Warrior variants include the Royal Artillery's Observation Post Vehicle, or OPV, the Command Post Vehicle, CPV, and a REME Recovery and Repair Vehicle. All variants are equipped with a 7.62mm tank gun. The Warrior variant in the arena is the Warrior 5130ES. This vehicle is operated by green personnel. It's armoured and armoured a 6.5-ton crane from the Warrior 510. The Warrior infantry fighting vehicle has the speed and performance to keep up its Challenger 2 tanks over the most difficult terrain, and has the firepower and armour to support the infantry in the assault. The Warrior family has 7 variants of armoured fighting vehicles. This one is the Warrior 510 infantry variant, with all the armour and protection for armoured infantry batteries and Iran, and of course the Billy all of the ATGU here in Bovington. On operations in Gulf War I and the Balkans. Although they look quite similar, only 5% of Challenger 2 components are interchangeable with those of its predecessor. Challenger 2 incorporated more than 150 major modifications, including a completely new turret, a new L30 120mm rifled main armament gun, and second generation system improvement has already been selected. The gun and sights are gyro stabilised and are fitted with a laser rangefinder and thermal imager, which means that Challenger 2 can fire while on the move across country by day. Challenger 2 has shown here everything been run. Smoke projectiles and high explosive squad head or head. Secondary armament is the coaxially mounted 7.62mm tank gun and the loaded and operating. The engine is a to be tasked to clear another position. India, T1 on this is Zulu, T1 Charlie. Position clear, It's the approval Alpha, Roger, welcome. Second position, call done. Multiple upset move, over. Roger, left up nose, okay. Lieutenant General and appointed Chief of
defence people in April 2016. He was commissioned into the Royal Artillery in 1986. Commanded his regiment in Iraq in 2003 and then the UN in Cyprus. He then spent some time in Kabul to coordinate the NATO drawdown from Afghanistan. And he will be taking the salute today on this Armed Forces weekend. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the British Army display and Tankfest 2017. Please give the crews a wave as they conduct their final lap. From everyone in the Armour Centre and the Armoured Trials Development Unit, thank you for watching the British Army display. Do come down to the tank park. Come and have a look at the vehicles once they are back in the tank park, where the crews will be pleased to show you around them and tell you more about life on tanks and armoured fighting vehicles. I hope you enjoy the rest of Tankfest. Today. So I'll get back to you shortly, in about 5 minutes or so, once these vehicles are in position to introduce David to you.
Share your pics on Instagram, hashtag Tank Museum.
Now we will see a bit later on some of those World War II German armoured vehicles. The Chieftain was really part of that, and after that it was mobility. Basically the British Army said we never want to go to war again with a tank that is outgunned by the enemy. So with the Chieftain you've got that whopping rating 120mm high velocity gun. Again, that one in service was by far the most powerful weapon system of tanks around the world. And this gun, very, very heavy metal, and even taken out into things uranium, which was quite product of the nuclear industry. That metal bar, one part steel from the in other words, it's pure weight, but like that. Be a lot better. The letdown, unfortunately, on the Chieftain was this famous Leyland LC Canard borders, hoping the Russians never came. Now the other tank driving around we brought on now, this is the American M60 tank. And the M60 is really is a tank that's seen a fair bit of combat around the world. Back in 1956, the Americans decided to upgrade their F-48 tank. The M60 looked very much like an M60, kind of like on steroids. Nothing in it. 105mm gun. We talk about the old bit of this, stunning the effective gun. fire a range of ammunition types. They could fire high explosive, armour piercing, smoke, canister, and that gun was picked on by lots of countries to put on their own tanks. Because it made some of the bigger guns productive. We put it on our Centurion tank. And when we did that, it made our huge tank, the Conqueror, with 120 millimeters. One of those 1,000 tanks that were built, and this particular version was called the M60A3, the Ride version, which was the Ride reliability improved. It's got a better engine in the back. But if the Cold War had been hot, that the Western tanks would have been fighting against. Now at the moment it's putting diesel on its hot exhaust, and that's how easily it can make that big smoke screen to hide itself behind. And if you can imagine a tank backing into that, it means basically that you can hide yourself from the enemy very, very quickly, which is going to be harder for them to train their guns on you and get a shot on you. Now the T-72 is probably about the most widely used main battle tank around the world. Well over 25,000 trips being made, it's all over the place, full of service, and it's a kind of development of those Russian what they've done and they did that by taking away the loader. A loader normally has to stand up in the tank or on the floor of the tank to put the large rounds in the breech of the gun. This gun is 25 millimeters, so it's bigger than that gun on the T-gun. And by getting rid of the loader, they can make them lower and slow fire, and they did that by keeping the current. There's kind of a cassette in that current, a bit like the gunner, who's one of the two people in the turret, then fires it. The gun goes level again, and then it's loaded the next round. So, very simple, very reliable, very effective tank. This particular T-72, this was swapped with Poland a few years ago. We gave them the Houston, they gave us this lovely T-72. And we've actually been using it with the Army on exercises on Salisbury Plain. As one of the things we can discuss a bit later is how tanks are coming back into fashion around the world. Now, you'll recognise from this morning that rumble of the empty diesel engine. That's on our Leopard tank driving around now. Now the Leopard was originally thought of way back in 1995. After the war, the German army, when it was allowed to reconstitute the Bundeswehr, they put a competition together and said, we want something they called then the standard answer. And the Germans decided, no, we don't want big heavy tanks like we had in World War II, like the Tyrant Panther. We want good firepower, but we want mobility. When this started to go into production in 1965, the MTU diesel engine in the back, and that can build this tank around the battlefield very, very quickly. So the idea was, instead of protection, your protection is speed. So less armour, more speed. So different philosophies at different times, how they were going to fight tanks in the Cold War. And different aims as well, because don't forget the Soviet T-72 was really going to be an attack. It wasn't about defending. So they made lots of T-72s, large quantities, and from that point of view as well, it was coming on different versions of tanks. They made a number of models as well. The first one was the Russian Army. Simpler models, less protection, wouldn't give them to the satellites over the Gulf countries. But they were going to be the tanks that went forward, massive tanks, large numbers of them. They knew the Russian idea was it was a short-term weapon system. What they call gill armour on the side. The crew can actually pull a lever, and that angles those square side plates above the road wheels forward at an angle. And the idea there was to help detonate incoming hollow charge weapons before they hit the main armour. It's the same sort of principle you see today in that farm or modern vehicles. Catch detonator or detonator being the hollow charge before it hits your vehicle, and by that making some changes or lessen the performance which will get to the hopper as heading towards your vehicle. So there's simple little methods of having the vehicle. On the back of the rack there, there's a drag, there's a fuel runs to extend the range of the vehicle, and again another one of those vehicles that's in service all around the world, which is why we are taking part in the British Army will be it's good after 10-15 years of counterinsurgency, the Army is happy to do something. It's reconfiguration, relearning how to fight, as they call it colloquially, Big Boys War. In other words, instead of fighting against counterinsurgency, it's Rifle, it's Spartan, Samaritan, Sultan, all on based on the Dandy vehicle, which is that one there, stormed into the news group, tracked reconnaissance. Now, this walk-up, a Cold War veteran, this is our Challenger 1 tank. We're very lucky, we've got two running Challenger 1s. One was used by Arthur Gennaro, Mark tank in the First Gulf War. Not because we thought they were going to fight, it was for the very, very common reason why we have tanks, is when you turn up with a tank, people tend to think it's the soldiers essentially one night, and we turned up in a Land Rover, they could stand up, and we turned up in our Challenger, people want to back off and stick, or maybe not stay. So it has that fright factor that's been true right at the beginning, and again in the back of what is great we've heard Now with this generation of tanks, you're getting up to about 62 tons, and when they went off to fight in the First Gulf War, not Bradley, then we added lots of extra armour on the outside. And again, the criticism you have to take care of this reason. Before Challenger 1 went off into service, lots of done from the mid-1930s or early 1930s to about 35. They were really experimental tanks. We were trying to learn how we were going to use light armour. And Marks 1 to 4 were really done in small numbers, test vehicles, and that led us on to building the Mark 6, which was the one that saw a lot of service at the beginning of the Second World War. Not many of these were made. We think in the late 20s, something like about 28 of them were probably put together. It's the last two-man tank the British Army experimented with. Commander in the top, driver in the front. You can see he's got his hatch open. And he's sitting there right next to a restoration back in the 1980s. It wasn't done very well, never ran. And they put this vehicle back together superbly. He's done a fantastic job. The other point I'd like to thank as well is the guy here today, remains nameless, but he paid for this whole restoration to happen. So, I'd like reminding people today, thank you for coming. We are an independent charity, we need that sort of support next to the driver. And during the restoration process, again you can see this on the film, we found that Meadows engine was actually being used by the longest sworn cars in the 1930s. So you're looking there again, same idea as the Scorpion. What's the best, most powerful engine being used by a sports car that's put in the tank? We must have really. So there's our lovely little light Mark 4. We don't think they were mainly used for training. A few may have gone to France. It looked like a couple were captured, so they may have gone to France as grounded training vehicles with the BEN. Some were captured, we think, by the Germans and converted into improvised assault guns. Now behind it, our famous Matilda 1, this tank Cutler, and they used a suspension system there they'd used on earlier Vickers tanks as well. So even though we tend to sort of poo-poo those earlier British tanks as not being that successful, this one was, and it did valiant service out in North Africa. Excuse me, it was also made in Canada, and most of the Canadian production, 1,420. Most of those, along with a number from Britain, was sent out to Russia. And it's one of the few Lend-Lease tanks the Russians actually liked from Britain. They understood that reliability. You can have a powerful tank, you can have great firepower, great armour protection, but it's no good to anyone if it doesn't start on the morning that you use it. And the Valentine is one of those tanks that had that reliability to it, so it was liked by the guys in it. 6-pounder meant they got rid of one of the crew members in the turret, so there's a tight squeeze there. This particular one was being made in late 42, early 43, and we painted this tank as it would have seen service out in Tunisia at the end of the desert campaign. Even though they originally designed it as one of those infantry tanks, we ended up using these as cruiser tanks. The three sort of ideas behind the tanks in the late 20s, late 30s, you had light tanks for scouting, infantry tanks, heavily armoured, tend to be slow for attacking a prepared position, and then cruiser tanks, supposed to be the ones that went through the damage to be made and headed off into the distance. Valentine's, they went out to the Far East. The Army had been service in after the war. The hull was also used for a number of other projects. The first ED tank was the Valentine. Self-propelled up was completed. So there was some superstructure on the top. They made the after the stock by the Royal Artillery. You can also see our Valentine roof layers on. But again, that has a better armour penetration than the 75mm on the Panther. So it's another thing we sometimes overlook. Our tank killing ability with those 17-pounder and this 77mm high velocity gun was stunning. And we also had in Britain, we'd come up with a discarding Sabo round. So the idea was you got a slug of tungsten, and we had access to tungsten, the Germans had limited supplies of it. You put a pot round it to the size of the barrel, in this case about 77mm, and you fire an enormous target behind it. But the fire that pot out, so on the left, get more protection than just having it nice to do it triangling. Yes, you've got a chance. If you imagine up the gun, they then up it to the 20-pounder, and then in the 1960s we had that L7 105mm gun, and it becomes by far the best tank in the world. No two ways about it. An absolutely stunning vehicle. It's got that perfect combination. It's got good mobility, it's got good armour protection, it's got a fantastic powerful 105 gun, and it was a generation of cruise. America, they looked to Britain, they followed the mechanised force experiments that were done by the British Army on the Salisbury Plain, and they spent some money, not a lot, but they spent enough money to build really roughly about 2 prototype or 2 test tanks a year around the 20s and 30s. And what they were doing, they were testing 2 components, so still war would come, and they know that a British a reliable system, or a reliable engine, reliable track, reliable type of suspension that they can then start using. Now we've got here, this is the M3A1 tank. This is their line tank, and really it dates back to experiments that started in 1933. And what they did there is, as war was coming, they started realising they may well have to start building large quantities of armoured vehicles. Roosevelt actually says, first of all, he wants 1,000 tanks a month, even before the war's begun. Then he actually says, no, I want 2,000 tanks a month. And this is one of those kind of miracles we can overlook. The Americans in 1940 had made in their entire history 380 tanks. By 1945, they made over 88,000 tanks. And that was their genius. They went to the American car industry. Most other countries went to their railways, or we used in the Fury movie, that was the main hero tank, as it were. Brian is driving it. He was on set with Buzz, our workshop guys, for about 6 months. Our Tiger tank went up onto that film set for a couple of weeks. Famously, the producers said there was more paperwork and admin to get the Tiger on the set than there was getting Brad Pitt, Logan Lerman and the rest of the crew there. We knew at the time we could not make a mess of our Tiger, or indeed the Sherman. So we were very, very careful, ensuring the track speeds up a bit, and that means you can turn left. So a very simple system there. Having said that, this is really a rather open, complex vehicle, needle bearings for doing what it is. It's really a little porter tug type thing. Sometimes they take a trailer around behind it, carrying ammunition and supplies forward. Fantastic on boggy ground like the Eastern Front. First used in combat by German paratroopers. They used it in the invasion of Crete in May 1941. And this particular Kettenkrant was captured in North Africa off of a lot called Rankers Paratroop Brigade. They were actually fighting in Tunisia, and this vehicle was captured about the same time as our Tiger, and like a number of vehicles in North Africa, were parcelled up, shipped back to Britain for evaluation at just off the M3, a place called Chertsey. That's where they took all the captured equipment, took it apart, had a look at it, photographed it, analysed it, worked out if we could learn anything from it or the best way of defeating it. So there, and this was restored some years ago, very kindly for us by Bruce Crompton, and we've got it in running order. We take it out every now and again, but it's got a fantastic battle history behind it. Now, following on from our Kettenkrant captured, not a similar period, this is our Panzer III, our famous Panzer IIIL. This particular model, it's got that long, soon after it was captured, being debombed. There's some local labour taking out all the shells out of it, and then it was shipped back to Britain with a number of other captured tanks for evaluation. Now this Panzer III, the L model, the Panzer III goes through a whole series of changes, different L-swungs they're called, L-swung A through to L, and this particular one with a long-barreled 50mm gun, it's got extra armour bolted on the front. We often look at the German tanks as being very, very successful. One point that's been made recently, and was even picked up by the Germans at the time, they spent about 10 years putting together, in the 1930s, their Panzer III and Panzer IV. Panzer I and Panzer II were really training tanks for the German military. Panzer III and Panzer IV were what they wanted to go to war with. They ended up spending a huge amount of time, energy and effort to design and build these tanks effectively, and ended up with two different tanks that were very, very similar. The firepower on the Panzer III was supposed to be for attacking other tanks. Panzer IV had a short-barreled 75mm gun to fire high explosive. That in essence was to help the tank on the attack. It was a support tank. Went along into action with the Panzer IIIs if they came against buildings, an anti-tank gun firing at them. The Panzer IV was supposed to fire its 75mm high explosive gun for blast effect. It didn't take too long to realise that both tanks, not only do they look the same, their armament, they realised they could swap. So they ended up making, the last model Panzer III ended up having that same 75mm gun as the early Panzer IVs, and they developed the Panzer IV in the end into stop being the support tank and being the tank to actually attack the enemy. So they put a long barrel 75mm guns on. So what's all that waffle mean? It really means is stop looking at the Germans all the time as if they got it right. Because quite frankly they did. They made just as many tanks States as we did in the West, and but we tend to still buy into all that German propaganda and how wonderfully successful and brilliant they were. So don't forget the Blitzkrieg campaign of May 1940, the official German history.